9 a.m. and time for the specially called meeting of the MAPS 3 Citizens Advisory Board. The agenda is a special one today since there's not one of our normally scheduled meetings. We'll call the meeting to order, and you have in your packet the subject matter and the alternate recommendations. And we're going to call on David Todd to set the stage for our meeting today. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The item before you today is number one, recommend awarding construction contract to Downey Contracting, LLC for the MAPS 3 Oklahoma River Phase 3 Whitewater Facility, base bid plus alternate 6 in an amount of $33,416,700, and funding the project and additional testing services with budgeted construction project funds, unused MAPS 3 Oklahoma River Phase 1 lighting funds in an amount of $305,000, eliminating the MAPS 3 Oklahoma River Phase 1 windscreen project in an amount of $3,084,058, and all MAPS 3 Oklahoma River Phase 4 projects in an amount of $8,912,615, and using excess Oklahoma City capital improvement sales tax funds in an amount of $2,907,485, project M3-R004. Or, number two, recommend rejecting the bids of the MAPS 3 Oklahoma River Phase 3 Whitewater Facility and directing the engineer to redesign the Whitewater Facility by reducing the scope of work to remove the buildings from the project, redesign the size and or character of the buildings, and bid the buildings as a separate project, project M3-R004. Or, number three, recommend rejecting the bids for the MAPS 3 Oklahoma River Phase 3 Whitewater Facility and directing the engineer to redesign the Whitewater Facility by reducing the scope of work, including reducing the length of the channels and the size and or character of the buildings, project M3-R004. As you know, the Whitewater project has come in over budget, and staff has worked several days with the consultant and with ADG, and we've gotten together and we looked at various options of what we felt like were possible to deal with this situation, and some of those were pretty drastic. And so what you have is the three options that we felt were the best options to bring before you, and the subcommittee saw these yesterday and recommended unanimously option one. We have some presentations today that will explain the options to you and further explain the situation. So I'd like to call Mike Mize from ADG up here. Mike's going to do the numbers part of the presentation, and then Scott Shipley will do more of content.
Thank you, David. Thank you, members of the advisory board. I'm happy to be here. The presentation that I'm going to give you today is not a lengthy one, but it gets a little bit complicated because this is a complicated issue. We're going to show you the bids that were received, how they relate to the Whitewater construction budget. Then we're going to show you how they relate to the Whitewater project as a whole. And then we're going to show you how that relates to the river projects, the overall river projects as a whole. So please, if you have questions, ask me, and I will do everything I can to answer your questions when you have them. So as David said, there's three options. Option one would be to award the contract to Downey, who was the low bidder on the project. Once that contract is awarded, it's possible to value engineer issues with Downey to try to reduce the scope of the project and thereby reduce the cost of the project. We have not done any specific estimates about how that might work, but based on our experience and the experience of the MAPS office and S2O, we believe that could result in a possible $4 million savings and would probably result in completion of the project in December of 2015, if that award were to go forward now. Option two would be to keep the two channels exactly the same as they are. And let me go back to option one. Option one effectively leaves the channels as they currently are, leaves the buildings pretty much as they are, but would use the expertise of Downey, S2O, the MAPS office, and ADG to try and find ways to reduce that cost. So the scope of the project from the public eye in option one would be no different than what you've seen in the plans that you've seen to date. Option two would leave the two channels as they currently are. We would do some of the same value engineering on those channels to try and reduce some costs there, and we would bid those separately from the buildings. There would be a redesign process for the buildings which would hopefully result in additional savings. So with the $4 million in value engineering that applies really to all three of these, and the additional savings on the buildings, we believe there's a possible $6 million savings on this project. Because of the fact that you'd have to redesign the project, which would take probably a couple of months, then rebid the project and award the contract, we think this would result in a delay of about 4 to 5 months, meaning that the Whitewater facility wouldn't be ready till maybe May of 2016. Option three would be to redesign both courses, both channels, to make them a little bit shorter. The competition channel, as we are currently proposing this, would still be an Olympic quality channel, would be available for and suitable for Olympic caliber events. The recreational channel would be shortened as well, and for the most part that might not affect the operations of the Whitewater facility, but it would reduce the ability to put people through on peak days. That would result in a reduction of revenue for the facility. A redesign of the buildings would be a part of this as well. That redesign could take place either separately from this process or as a part of it, and you could bid the channels, once again, you could bid the channels separately from the buildings. One of the reasons to do that is because the contractors who would build the channels might not be building contractors and vice versa. So there may be some potential savings for that as well. Once again, that would involve redesign, rebidding, and a probable start of May of 2016. So the first chart that you have in front of you compares the bids to the actual Whitewater construction budget, which was $19,840,840. The Downey bid was $33,416,000, and which results in a shortfall or a difference of $13,575,000. This next chart talks about the impact on the Whitewater budget overall. Now you'll notice that the difference down there is $15 million as opposed to the $13 million I showed you on the previous slide. The difference is in the land acquisition and site prep, and David has informed you all along that that land acquisition cost might be more, and in fact has come in about $1.5 million more than budgeted. And when the cost of the Whitewater project was increased, it resulted in a proportionate increase to the architectural fees, and those are both reflected in the difference between the $13 million and the $15 million. Any questions about that?
Mike?
Yes, sir.
You may have said this and it got past me, but one of the things you said yesterday in the subcommittee meeting was the impact of option one and maybe the other two options on phase 4 of the Whitewater project, of the river project. And I didn't hear you mention that today. You said there was an assumption in all of these about the impact in the latter part. Are you getting to that?
Next slide.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine.
Mike, can I just maybe point out or be clear that that $15 million or the $13 million does include $1 million contingency,
Correct.
so that's built into the
There
project?
would still be $1 million contingency in the project.
Great, thank you.
So this shows the overall river projects. And it shows what would happen if we used the $33 million Downey bid. This does not take into account any savings yet, because those savings have not been quantified or identified. So it's the raw $33 million bid, and the contract would have to be awarded in that amount. And so if that were to happen, one of the options is to take the money, all of the money from Phase 4, all of the balance of the money from the windscreens, the balance of the money remaining from the lighting project, apply it to the Whitewater, and then you would still have a deficit of about $3 million. The resolution which David read proposes that $3 million would be borrowed from excess sales tax collections from the overall MAPS program. Once the value engineering has been completed, the hope is that it would exceed that $3 million. That $3 million could then be paid back to the MAPS program. That would leave that would leave nothing for any further river projects, just to make that clear. So, what's that? Correct. Thank you, Kim. So, once again, I'm just going to leave these three options up here right now, and I believe Scott Shipley is going to come up and give you a presentation about what the graphic and physical implications are of each one of these options.
Can you switch to the other presentation? Thank you for having me. I just wanted to put a face to what these, sorry, you can't hear me, can you? Put a face to what these changes mean in terms of changes to design. And so, as Mike said, there are three options there. The current design, as you see it, this is the design that was bid. It includes alternates, including the bridge on the upper side of the course, a full building with restaurant and retail and a number of commercial things that happen around that central building area as you enter, and a fountain and a sort of grand entryway as you come into the facility. In option one, we looked at cost reduction savings, things that we could do to value engineer and try to decrease the overage of that bid. Roughly, there are $4 million in savings. We don't take the option for the upper bridge, for example. The lower bridges were changed from a custom bridge that was designed to a prefabricated bridge that would come in at a much lower price. So there were changes, some that you could see, some that you couldn't see. The waterfall that hid the pump station, for example, was a very visible element. So was the entry fountain. Those were value engineered out of the project. Other ones, such as an extra filter that wasn't needed, and some of the sort of belt and suspenders type engineering solutions where we had been conservative in our calculations, but are comfortable moving forward with the solution that results in a cost savings. And some things just in terms of constructability were there. So the advantage to this option is there's no reduction in core scope. There's as much capacity and as much ability to create profit as in the design that was bid. In option two, that course is the same. So the Whitewater portion of the course, including those value engineering options, are the same, but the buildings are drastically reduced, and it takes a lot of the commercial elements out of the buildings. It's a ticket booth and a covered area, and restrooms, but not the sort of expansive nature that we had, and some of the buildings disappear in their entirety. Option three takes all the value engineering as well as the building changes, but also shortens the course. And so if you kind of look through the rendering that's there, you can see the darker lines, which mark a shorter course. Both at the upper end of the course, we shortened significantly, as well as at the lower end. And so you see about a 30% reduction in length in the recreation channel, and about a 20% reduction in length in that inner channel, which is the competition channel. The pond also decreases in size, so you see changes in that sense as well. I'll open it up for discussion.
Well, if I might, we've mentioned some of the pros and cons of each of these options. And Karen, can you go back to that last slide on my presentation? Thank you. Actually, it's the first slide as well. So that's perfect. Thank you. Option one, the pros of option one are that effectively there's going to be no change to the scope of the project or the functionality of the project. If there is a downside to it, it's the option that offers the least amount of potential savings. Option two results in some potentially larger savings to the project and to the overall river projects. It maintains the two channels at their current length and design. Some of the downside to this is that it would require, it results in a change of the buildings. They may not match the rest of the buildings in the boathouse district. Once that's done, it results in a probable delay of delivery of the project. We may end up with two different contractors on the site, which could also be an issue. Option three, the benefit of option three is that it has the most potential savings. It also provides both a recreational and a competition channel. Granted, they're both a little bit shorter, but the competition channel continues to be workable for Olympic competitions. The downsides are very similar to option two, a probable time delay, it also results in, on those peak days, the probability of reduced revenue because you would not be able to put as many people through the recreational channel as you would on the longer course. So,
Zane, I know you have a question. I wanted to accommodate our colleague, Michael Adams. He has to leave. He is the vice chair of this committee, and he said he's been very much involved in this, and he's going to have to leave us early. So I wanted him to have a chance to ask any questions or provide any discussion, and then the rest of us will. Is that agreeable with everybody?
Thank you, Tom.
Okay, Mike, it's you.
Mike, could you comment a little bit on the consequences and risks of rebidding the project?
I appreciate you asking that question. I should have mentioned that. If we were to choose options 2 or 3, there is no guarantee that once we redesign and rebid the project that it's going to come in under the bids that we currently have. This is a very unique project. We thought initially that we had a significant amount of interest on the part of local contractors to bid this. I think 9 general contractors showed up for the pre-bid meeting. We had only 3 bids. Some of the key components of this project, which are the dirt work and the electrical, there was only one sub contractor in each of those categories that we're aware of that provided numbers. That's not good for competition. If the bidding climate continues to get tighter, which is great for the city because it means there is a lot going on, there's also the possibility that people would look at this because it's a unique project, because it's not something that people do every day. They'll look at it that it has significant risk, and they'll bid it accordingly. The more risk it has, the higher their prices will be. There's no guarantee that we got one electrical bid this time. There's no guarantee that those folks would not have enough work that they don't need to bid this one a second time. So does that answer your question? Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Also, could you talk a little bit, or maybe Scott talk a little bit about why we think the bids were so much higher than originally estimated in the climate, I guess, that we're in?
Certainly, there were 3 or 4 major impacts there. I think the big one, which we already discussed, is there was a perceived risk, and so that turned into dollars in the contractor's mind. If there's a risk that it'd be more difficult to build or something that was unknown, then they would mitigate that risk with cost. And I think that was a very real impact in this case. The other one is constructability. It's a very tight site in terms of access and able to work in parallel, or ability to work in parallel. I think that they perceive that, hey, this is going to push the schedule, and there's risk there because there is a tight timeline on this. The bidding, we also discussed, less people bid. There was less competition there if you compare it to what we expected or to other projects that have recently bid in this environment. And I think the last part is we just honestly read the tea leaves wrong. We had taken the information that we had regarding cost to build this type of facility in other places. We had extrapolated that to this environment, and I think there was a bit of a miss there as well on our part.
So one of the major issues is just the climate in Oklahoma City today, as far as all the construction work that's going on, and
We have heard
they
that.
already have full books and don't need to.
We have heard rumors of that. One of the major contractors didn't bid because they would have had to hire additional folks and train them in order to bid this. And so that's all through the rumor mill. That's not discussions we've had. But at the same time, I think that there is a lot of work here, and people they didn't have to be as hungry and sharpen that pencil as much. So
I guess just, as Tom mentioned, I guess the subcommittee did unanimously recommend option 1, and at least in part of my thinking there, and I wish I want to express this in case I have to leave before we get to further discussion, is that in options 2 and 3, in option 2, we're only looking at possibly $2 million in savings on top of option 1. And the risks involved in rebidding it, plus the delays in the operations, didn't seem worth the $2 million to me. And so, and likewise on the third option is only $4 million additional savings, and you get a much scaled down course. So that was kind of my thought process going through it. I mean, it'd be nice to go back and rebid it and hope to get some savings. We don't know we will, and we'll be delaying the project. And so I think that was maybe the committee, but at least my thought process in this.
Thank you, Mike. I appreciate you making the effort to be here today. And Zane, now your question. I apologize.
I think Mike already covered that. My concern was that there's no guarantee that if we recompete the buildings, that they would come in less.
That's correct.
And you answered that question, so that's Mike hit it with the first question that he asked.
Here's the chair of our River Subcommittee.
Yes, we did. We agonized over this, but we all came in unanimously on it. And I would like to point out at this time, we want something spectacular for Oklahoma City. We want the first-class facility that we already have down at the riverboat section of our city. And we also have to remember that the people that use the facility, the ones that go down the rafting, are not the only ones involved. We have mothers and grandmothers and dads that drive kids that are underage, and we've got to make it comfortable for them too. So by cutting out the facility and making it bare bones and grandma doesn't have anywhere to sit in the shade, they're not going to want to come back. So we have to make it an overall really good experience for everybody. So with that in mind and many, many other reasons, we voted to accept option 1.
I was just, if I could comment on what Dee was going to say, that was exactly, I thought a very good question that was asked yesterday was how many people use a whitewater facility that aren't actually on the water, but are there spending money. And if we eliminate the restaurant and the gift shop and the opportunities for revenue, I really do think we're shortchanging the long-term sustainability of the entire facility.
Mike?
Yeah, Mike, I'm unfamiliar. Can you tell me a little bit about the Oklahoma City Capital Improvement Sales Tax Funds? Are those match dollars?
Yes. Yeah, what we're talking about is excess collections that will essentially be loaned until we have to award the contract before we can do any kind of value engineering to reduce that $4 million. So we'll have to borrow money from the excess collections. And then as we award the contract and value engineer that, we'll essentially pay that back. So the river subcommittee will still stay within their river budget to award this project.
David, you'll correct me of course I know you will if I'm wrong, but as I recall, when we were looking at making the difference because of significant shortfall in the sidewalk, and we talked about not using any additional funds because we couldn't predict the future in terms of sales tax revenue. And what bothers me about this is the use of those funds. It is not the Whitewater facility. I went to one of the focus groups, and I walked away so impressed and excited about the Whitewater facility itself. But I am concerned that we are taking we're doing a 180, it seems to me, on the use of excess funds that we weren't able to do or weren't willing to do for the sidewalk.
This would just be, as I said, a temporary loan, so to speak, and then they would value engineer that back. And right now, based on my conversations with S2O, we're confident that we can get to this $3 million. But remember that we have contingency funds in the program, and we have these excess collection funds, and council awarded sidewalks $9 million of some of those excess funds.
And that was going to be my second point, but it seems to me that it's not, I don't feel comfortable recommending the use of those funds for this purpose. Now, that's the council's purview. I understand that. But because of what I've just said about the sidewalk situation, I'm just real reluctant to and I assume I'll be in the minority here, but I'm reluctant to go forth. And what I found was really interesting in the resolution itself, it calls for using those funds. Mike did say borrowing, which is different, it seems to me.
Technically, we have to put on there using until we can do the value engineering. Remember, like I said, we have the original contingency funds and then the collections. Originally, we were up in the $60 million range until we gave the $9 million to sidewalks. So we're still up in the $50 million range of excess collections. And you're right, early on, that was the mindset is, let's be careful with what we're doing to make sure we can fund the whole program. Now we're out past 60% or so of collections, and this is a very small part of that. So we felt comfortable just asking for what I would loosely define as a loan.
Okay.
Susan?
I have a different subject question. So in case there's a follow-up here, you guys okay?
Go ahead.
My question is timing and the impact of moving. Like if we move to May of 2016, what's the impact to the river? And it might be more of a Mike Riverman question.
Yeah.
Is that my new title?
I like it.
Okay. All right. Well, it is a significant impact. As we discussed yesterday, there's a real opportunity cost that really should be considered in this, because not only is there obviously an operational aspect of losing 6 months of operations by not opening for the full 26. You have to understand that when you operate a center like this, you have to do a whole lot of recruiting. You have to do a whole lot of hiring. You have to ramp up with, the expertise and the management to really professionally run a whitewater center. So the operator, the foundation, will have to do that, and so to open mid-year, it's going to be difficult in terms of trying to ramp up and then make it work for half a year. The second part of that is there are some key promotional or event opportunities that I think also need to be considered. We do have the opportunity to host the Olympic trials for the 2016 Rio Olympics. The only way that we have a chance to host the Olympic trials would be to have this project complete by late 2015, because they have to be assured that it has been tested and that it will work. And then with that will come national exposure, national television, and when we look at opportunities, it's hard to quantify what that means from a marketing and promotional aspect, but we do think it's significant. And this is a differentiating project. This is a project that's going to be very unique for Oklahoma City. There's only two other in this entire country, only one other that's really comparable, and to be in with an opportunity to have national exposure for it on the year it opens, I think is very significant. So that weighs very heavily into our consideration as well. But again, I think the losing half a year is very significant in the operating model. So, thank you.
Bob?
I have a question, I guess probably should be directed to our esteemed council. I just want to make sure I'm understanding. If we accept this bid, but are able to value engineer cost reduction, do I understand correctly that we will enjoy those cost reductions? We're not obligated to pay the full $33 million, even though that bid has been accepted, if the actual numbers come in less than that. Is that correct?
So the contract would be awarded at the $33 million. What would happen is there would be change orders that would account for those value engineerings. So it would be a deduct from the contract amount. We would be able to take advantage of those deducts, but the original contract would be at that $33 million.
Okay. Well, I understood from the conversation yesterday that we can't negotiate a new contract number. We either accept the bid or we go out and rebid it.
That's
Just
correct.
want to make sure that we have at least some measure of control if that value engineering results in substantial reduction. Some measure of control to say to the contractor, just spend what you need to spend and not just bill us the $33 million because that was the contract amount.
We have the opportunity to do change orders, which will reduce either quantity, well, amendments will reduce quantities, or change orders which will reduce the components or scope of the project. But the $33 million contract price will be that price. We will have to rely on our consultants and MAP staff to determine what value engineering can be done. And I believe their indications are that right now they believe $4 million.
Right, and yeah, we will award it and we'll change order it down. So let's say it goes from 33 to 29. We're paying 29. There's no more, unless there's additional change orders. But
I just wanted to make sure that the contractor couldn't legally say, just fold his arms and say, no, my contract, $33 million. I know the actual cost was 29, but I'm not going to agree to a change order. Do they have that?
Well, it doesn't. It really doesn't matter, and this is really getting out there, but it doesn't matter what it costs him. Whatever we agree to on the contract, that's what we pay. It's not negotiated. We don't check every item and go through his bill of materials and his labor and all that. I think that's what you're asking.
Well, and that's my concern, that we could do all the value engineering that we want to on paper, but if it doesn't result in an actual cost savings because the contractor can hold us to the full price, even though we have changed materials or whatever, amount of labor, whatever it happened to be, that would reduce the value of reduce the cost of the project. If the contractor, I just want to know whether the contractor has the power to hold us to that full $33 million. So the value engineering is only theoretical because we still have to pay the $33 million.
They don't have the ability to hold us to the $33 million without. We are able to propose change orders. The issue is, right now, we can't determine the cost of those change orders because we don't know the value that are included in that bid.
Sure, I understand that.
So if, for instance, we were to remove that bridge at the top of the Whitewater, we will receive a value for that bridge. We just don't know the exact amount of that value right now, and that would be through a change order, and we could, the contractor cannot restrict us from removing that from our project.
Okay, and that's really the crux of my question, that if we make a change through value engineering or otherwise, we can implement the change order and the contractor cannot refuse to. If we've taken something out of the project, they can't refuse the change order. That's my concern.
It is definitely a process that we go through, and we work with the contractor because we have to determine what that value is of that change order. So in that sense, we have to come to an agreement. But in terms of what we want in the project, that's a determination for the city.
Right. Okay. And I understand from your comment yesterday, David, that the contractor that has this bid is doing other stuff on the river and is performing well, and staff gets along well with them. So I'm not terribly concerned that that would happen. I just want to make sure that that issue is on the table, that we talk about value engineering. But if it's only in our minds or on paper and doesn't make any difference in terms of real dollars, when all is said and done, if the contractor can just say, I want my $33 million, regardless of any value engineering, any changes that are done, I just want to know that up front.
I need to clarify something. When I was talking about the collections and things, I want to make clear that the 50 or so million that we have is contingency funds and excess collections. It's not all excess collections. I may have misspoke a little bit there, but we have the contingency funds within the program, and then we have excess collections. When you take out the $9 million that council has appropriated for additional sidewalks, it's somewhere in the $50 million range. So I want to make sure.
Thank you, David. Kim?
Which also includes $30 million that we have set aside, correct?
Yes, that's included in that.
Which is an overall contingency, not earmarked to any plan, but overall to MAPS 3.
That's right.
So this could become technically a part of that contingency itself.
That would be up to council, but yes.
Theoretically.
Could be, yeah.
It could be, or proposed that way. I have a couple other questions, if I may.
Go right ahead, Kim.
Mike Young, Riverman. No.
Young Mike.
I
like that better.
I like Young Man River. I had a great propensity for Old Man River, and
Yeah.
I'd love to call you Young Man River.
I'll go with that.
I have a lot of faith in S2O and what they've engineered and what the subcommittee has worked together, because I think we've brought the right people to do this. What my concerns are is how you have operated with the knowledge that you had in moving forward. How many organizations or individuals have you met with that are sharing the same perspective on our course option 1 or our full whitewater course, and making plans on their end to possibly contract us for future events past the Rio Olympic trials?
Yeah. Well, there is a significant amount of interest in this venue that we're creating, and you know, and without rattling off all the different opportunities, I mean, we have had interest from the International Federation about having, you know, events of that nature, international events in the future, and all of that was, you know, they've seen the plans, they've seen the renderings, and I think there is a great enthusiasm. What we've proposed and what Scott and S2O have designed is truly world-class, best in the world quality, and that is the standard we have set for the river, and that's what we're known for. And I think, you know, I think it's important to remember that when we're considering these options, because, you know, that is in essence what is really attracting. We have a World Championship in September. We're going to have several international officials here who will make decisions about future international events. And I just think we're sending a very important message with this, that we are committed to excellence, we're committed to being world class, and I did want to make this one added point. The buildings are part of that. There's been a great deal of effort. I mean, we all, I think, can appreciate, due to a lot of the heavy lifting done by some of the stakeholders in the community to help develop this really world class image for the river, and thanks to the vision and you know, Rand and others who have been involved in this, we have a tremendous, iconic venue. And I think it's, when you look at the Whitewater, we really see this. This is the signature project for the development that we really don't want to back up from what we've started. And so I think it's important to consider that aspect too, because we do have such a international interest in following. Sometimes it's hard, and from my perspective, I see that. Sometimes it's hard to convey that, you know, what I see to everyone, but there is a tremendous amount of international interest in Oklahoma City due to our river, due to what we've created. And there are people planning on moving here because of this Whitewater Center. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but it is very robust in terms of the interest. So.
And then the other question I had for you is, are you concerned about not having a windscreen, or the advantages or disadvantages without it?
Certainly, I was an advocate for I still am an advocate. I also understand you have to make this. We're here to make difficult decisions, and the windscreen is important. I will always maintain it's important. However, the Whitewater Center will impact the most people, the citizens of Oklahoma City. More people will be impacted by far by the Whitewater Center. The impact of, from an international perspective, the overall impact of the Whitewater is greater than the windscreen. That being said, I still want to say that the windscreen is important if we're continue to maintain that standard that we're setting forth, that it is important, and I think we will work on finding other ways to do that over time. And I'd say the same thing with the grandstand.
And then I just have one final question. Mike, what would you say the biggest aspects were, or David, on the overages on the bid pursuant to what we anticipated would happen? I mean, is it any one significant area?
I don't think it's any one significant area. I think Scott covered it reasonably well. There were a number of issues, the complexity of the project, the uniqueness of the project, the timing with respect to the rest of the opportunities that bidders had in the marketplace at the time. All of those contributed to it.
I was just going to add if you had more questions.
And then is that sending us a message on other projects moving further that we may need to open our eyes a little bit broader now?
That's a good point, but we also have the example recently of the Fairgrounds Exposition Building, which is a more traditional type of construction, where we had 8 bidders, and the low bid came in, the base bid came in $2 million under the budget. So
our value engineering could possibly elevate skill levels in some of our businesses, so the risk factors in their perception are less in the future because of what they learned through this project?
Well, and I think that's true, but this project is unique among all the MAPS projects. Most of the projects going forward are going to be much more traditional kinds of construction. The wellness centers, the convention center, even though it's large, the convention center is much more typical kind of construction. But we will be cognizant of and working very diligently to make sure that there are no surprises like this again.
Bob?
Yeah. Mike, just one other quick question. Remind me, make sure I'm understanding, the Phase 4 project that we're giving, is that just the grandstand, or is there something else in Phase 4 that we're giving up?
I'm going to get young Micah.
Okay.
Just keep going with that, yeah. Bob, the main thing was the grandstand. There were other aspects, potentially some additional lighting. There's actually a provision for some additional improvements in the Whitewater Center, which really we're pretty much, I think, getting in what we're proposing here with option 1. And I would just say with the grandstand, one point I would like to make is when we came up with the grandstand plan 5 years ago or whenever that was, I think it was well thought out. However, in the operations of these events and the venue, we've seen a real desire for people to really, to be on that the North Bank because of the amenities, all of the attractions, everything that's being developed is really a draw to people, and so we have created terracing that is essentially serving the purpose kind of like a grandstand there. And in fact, part of Phase 2 was to create a big dock, which is underneath the Finish Line Tower, which is really is serving as a floating stage. And in fact, we had a concert there 2 weeks ago. So we are able to perform much of what we intended the grandstand to to offer already. Now, that being said, we would like to expand that in the future, and I think we'll look for ways to do that. And the final thought the thing I would mention is, as we've gone through these phases, and we've done a lot of study on the South Bank and understanding through the windscreen analysis and other phase 2 analysis of what's under the ground there, that it's going to be very difficult to build the grandstand even as originally proposed because of the restrictions on the site. So I don't even know that it would be feasible to do what was originally planned.
Well, I take it you would, all factors considered, can live without the phase 4 in favor of option 1.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Nathaniel?
I have a very basic question. I think it's because I missed yesterday. Everybody else may know this answer, but in options 2 and 3, it doesn't say that we are not doing the wind wall and that we're not doing phase 4. Right. So in options 2 and 3, you are doing the wind wall and option 4. Is that right?
I don't think we can make a definitive statement about that today, because if we were to choose option 2 or option 3, we wouldn't know what the actual cost was, the actual bid cost was, until we had done the redesign and received bids. At that point in time, we'd have to go back and look at how that would impact the overall river project and what additional funds might be needed to make up for that. So we did not mention that because we really, at this point, couldn't provide an answer.
As it is now, option 1 actually saves the most money, because by not doing the wind wall in option 4, that's $12 million. And so it'd be really hard to make up that $12 million in a subsequent bid. So that's, in my mind, it's actually when it says saving $4 million, $6 million, $8 million, it's really like saving $16 million, $6 million, $8 million if you keep those latter two in the options 2 and 3. Looking at the project as a whole. I mean, yeah, I understand looking at the Whitewater facility, the actual construction, but looking at the whole facility, the whole project, it's more meaningful savings to do it that way in option 1.
I heard this morning on TV that Forbes in New York City has identified Oklahoma City as an up-and-coming place for tourism. And I don't know about you guys, but I haven't heard anything like that since the days of the land run. You know, go west. Option 1 preserves that, and not only does it preserve it, it's going to take us beyond that. So I don't know if we're time for a motion, or how are we going to do this? I would make a motion that we move forward with option 1.
I'm a strong advocate of option 1. I think, as Mike was saying, we want the premier, both Mikes were saying, we want the premier whitewater facility in the country, and there are just, I think, too many risks in the other 2 options about what we would get for our money. I mean, they're totally unknown at this point. We may not enjoy much savings at all with new bids that come in, and yet we would be giving up something in terms of the quality of the project, and perhaps not only dampening our own enthusiasm, but not meeting the expectations of the community that have been looking at renderings of this project and hearing about it for a long time. If there is any feasible way to do option 1, I think that is by far the preferred way to go. I know ultimately it's going to come down to the city council and whether they want to borrow some other funds and feel that's possible. Mike, it's hard to articulate, but I'm not sure that I see our reliance on contingency or excess funds in this case to be quite the same as the sidewalks. The sidewalks, I mean, we started with hundreds of miles of sidewalks in a master plan, and MAP sort of overestimated how much we would be able to do within the budget that we had. But for that particular project, relying on contingency or excess funds just to expand a few miles, to me, is somehow different. Again, I'm not sure how I can articulate it. but somehow different than relying on excess collections or contingency funds to do really what we plan to do in the first place. And I think this project, and I don't want to minimize the sidewalks, but another mile of sidewalks to me is not as important as doing Whitewater the way we originally envisioned. I'm in favor of the motion.
I hear your point, Bob, but again, for me, it really does have to do with the fact that we've decided to use additional MAPS funds for this project, and we chose not to do that to fund the 70 miles of original sidewalks that was in the original proposal, and I'm just uncomfortable with that. And I understand what your point is, but it's only for that reason. In fact, if there was nothing in here about utilizing these, or using, in this case, as the language is, funds, I would vote for this if we were saying and ask the council to figure out where the money's coming from. But we chose not to do that for sidewalks, and therefore I don't like the precedent. But I understand what you all are saying.
But, Mike, we did use. The council took $9 million out of our contingency funds and gave it to sidewalks. Now, it didn't get us all the miles. But what they promised to do was also use as much city funds as possible and overages of city funds and other funds to fund the whole sidewalk plan. And they accepted the master plan of sidewalks and said, this is our overall goal, and someday we're going to get there. And as Gary Mars told us when he sat on this horseshoe, is that we have to remember that this is like a horse race. You know, the horses are going to constantly move back and forth. Things are going to be in the lead. Things are going to change. It's always going to be evolving. And we have to make decisions today based on what we know today. And maybe taking the knowledge of what we had yesterday, but we have to make decisions today in the now and looking forward. And the amount of collections we have and the usage, I mean, it's growing, and we're very blessed for that. And the more things we bring so that Oklahoma City becomes that tourism point, the greater those collections will be and the greater the overages were. Those overages are set for all the projects. And now we have an opportunity where we can use it to complete a project. Now, am I sorry that we're having to use maybe a lot of the contingency and percentage to this? Yes. But does it complete it? Yes. Does it make it worth it? Yes. And if I had a checking account where I could write a check for $2,907,485, I'd pick up my pen and do it right now, but I can't. So all I have is the wisdom of knowing that's why there's a contingency plan. And that's where we have to look at it and say, does it really make sense? And sometimes it's the hard decision. It may not be the sidewalk, but it may not be the sidewalk today. You know, at the end, we may end up with enough money that we fund all the sidewalks. But this is a huge part of this project, so I'll put my soapbox away.
Anyone else? Well, let me add my 2 cents then as we conclude. I think, Mike, that you make a really good point. And Bob as well. I see some similarities between this and the sidewalk, although I acknowledge the difference that you've pointed out. The similarities that I see are kind of how I envision our job here. When things don't go as they go, you decide in 2009 to start on a plan. And by 2014, you can anticipate that some things are not going to be exactly what they were in 2009. And so I think what's expected of us is to try to deal with the facts that we have as they come and to exercise our best judgment. But the key to me is our job is to put the council in a position to make a decision. We're not the decision makers. We don't have to say this is right and this is wrong. But we don't have to say, gee, things aren't going well, let's throw up our hands and not do anything. I mean, what I think they would like to see us do is to bring them a plan that we think is the most reasonable one based on the facts as we know them today. Actually, that's what we did in sidewalks. In sidewalks, they rejected our recommendation about the number of miles for sidewalks. They rejected our original plan, the council did. And they sent it back and said, do this again. And you know what we did differently? we brought a plan back, Susan and her committee brought a plan back that says, if we had the money, we'd build 100 miles of sidewalk, and here's what they are, and here's what the priority is. They brought back a plan. And the council said, gee, we like that plan. We're going to put some more money in it. And that's what we're doing here. That's all we're doing here. We're saying the bids have come in higher. We're not going to be able to do it as originally planned. We're having to decide, do we want to put the money in the signature project, or do we want to do the ancillary things in phase 4 that Mike thinks is important? We all think those are important. But are we going to substantially deliver what we told the taxpayers we were going to do? And I kind of see that as our job, is to put the council in a decision to make a position with a plan, not, gee, nothing's going to work, things aren't going well. I think what they want to hear from us is, look, something unexpected has happened, but we have a plan for you to do it. If you don't want to do it, send it back to us. They've done that. If they like this plan, it's a way forward that will take us on a path to achieve our goals. And that's why I'm going to vote for it. And I think option 1 is clearly the best option. But I do think, Mike, reasonable minds can differ. When things are uncertain, reasonable minds can differ. And so I don't find fault with anybody's comments. I just say, I like the idea of taking the plan forward and putting them in a position to make a decision. Anybody else?
If I could, Tom, just make a quick comment, really, and it's to thank everybody for working through this difficult problem. We, never want to find ourselves here, and from time to time, we do. We cannot have anticipated in 2009 how complicated this was going to be, or how unique a project it was, or, in fact, how much construction would be going on in the city of Oklahoma City to make this bid ostensibly come in a lot higher than we thought it was going to. So over the last couple of weeks, we've watched the teams all come together. We've watched city staff. We've watched the advisory committees. We've watched our consultants, really brainstorm to figure out how to make lemonade out of what wasn't such a great situation. And so I'm so grateful. We have some experience with this. We had it happen in MAPS 1. We certainly had it happen in MAPS for Kids. We had it happen with the Sports Facilities Trust, where we had to significantly value engineer the Chesapeake Arena. And I think we delivered a fabulous product, and most of the things that we were able to accomplish in that, and nobody would ever know weren't there. And so I just really want to say thank you, Mike. This has been a tough, young Mike, it's been a really tough tough experience to go through. You're going to look like old Mike in a few minutes. But I just really think everybody's done a great job. And Mike, I appreciate your comments as well. I think the differentiator for me is that we're asking here for a loan that we will be able to value engineer and will pay back. These aren't dollars that we're taking out of excess funds. We have to, I think from a legal standpoint, I'm not a lawyer, but I think legally to award the contract, we have to have the available dollars. But we have every expectation that those dollars will be value engineered out, and the actual cost of the contract will turn out to be 29 instead of 32, and those dollars go back into the contingency fund. We just have to have access to, it's like having a line of credit at your bank. I think to write the check, we have to have access to those dollars, and if we value engineer and they won't be spent, they go right back into the contingency fund. So we were asking to spend those dollars for sidewalks versus borrowing those dollars for this project. To me, that's a significant difference. So thank you all very much for your hard work and commitment to making this just an outstanding, world-class facility.
Carol and Amanda, we're on item 3 in the agenda, and it says citizens. We have a motion. Should we vote first, or should the opportunity be given to citizens to comment now?
Mr. Chairman, you can give them the opportunity to discuss any matter or comment on this matter. However, you do have a motion on the table, so you're still technically at item 1. So, 2.
Okay, great. All right. I'm going to offer the opportunity for any citizens that want to make a comment on this to do so. Seeing none, the motion's been made and seconded that we adopt the option 1 as has been read to you by David. Is there further discussion? All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The chair recognizes that the ayes have it. The recommendation is adopted, and so we'll move that forward to the council. Now, any other comments by the board?
I have a comment. I would like to let everyone know that this Trails and Sidewalk Committee understands that we've gotten $9 million and we're not finished asking. And that $3 million that we just borrowed, when it's paid back, I know where it can be spent.
Well, I wanted to comment that you're also on the Convention Center Committee. You have anything to say about that? Any other comments? I assume that after Mike's, old Mike's, this is old Tom saying old Mike. After old Mike's comment, I thought Bob might do a little boasting here about the fair coming in under budget, but great job with you guys.
Well, I want to keep that extra $2 million under budget for something else to do at the fairground. So you can't have mine yet.
Any other comments by the staff?
I'd just like to thank everybody for having this special meeting so that we can move this along and we don't delay it any further. So thank you for giving your time today.
Well, then, as we close the meeting, Scott, I want to thank you and your team for continuing to work with us. I hope that you guys, if the council votes to follow our recommendation, that you guys will get the job done with Downey when the contract is awarded. Mike and Nicole and your team, I clearly can't do it without you. Really appreciate all the good job you're doing. And the subcommittee, Michael's gone, Michael Adams is gone, but Dee and Michael have done a great job of managing this process. They've obviously got a lot of help, including Mike Knopf on that committee. But they've done a great job of working their way through something that was unanticipated. And I want to compliment you, Dee, and I hope you'll pass it on to Michael. And, of course, David and his staff have really done yeoman work in getting all of this pulled together to put us in a place to make a decision in a timely manner so that the decision will make a difference if it's made timely. And so, to all involved, I echo what Councilman Meg Salyer said, and I just say thank you to all of you. And if there's nothing further, we're adjourned.